When I first started Spanish, I was overwhelmed with all of the available resources and I had no idea where to start. I just wanted to know what resources I could actually count on in order to make progress, rather than endlessly learning about the rules of Spanish without actually getting anywhere. So whatever your reasons are for wanting to learn Spanish, I'm going to share with you everything I've used to get me from the point of a complete beginner to now where I can start to understand native TV and radio without having to sit down and study at all. Also, make sure you stick around to the end because I have a cheeky little YouTube hack that will help you be able to access native content that little bit sooner. So I've already done a video covering the YouTube channels in Spanish that I would recommend, and I was going to do a follow-up one to that as well as another video about my favorite podcast, but because I know your time is precious, I'm going to put everything here so that you've got it all in one place to come back to if you want to refer to it later. I'm going to link everything down below to save you Googling stuff. Full disclosure, some of that's going to be affiliate links, but that is no extra cost to you and helps to support the channel. Before we jump into the resources, I just want to add that to make this work, you do want a little bit of ambiguity. You're not going to understand everything 100% of the time. And you want a little bit of ambiguity because that's how you learn. If there's none, it's too easy. But if it's too ambiguous, you basically don't understand anything, and then so you need to then go and find something easier. So if you're starting out, or if you're a false beginner, i.e. you've done a little bit of Spanish but you're not that advanced at all, then here are some awesome resources that I'd recommend. Spanish Uncovered is where I started my Spanish journey. It isn't a cheap course, but it does give you a good idea of the language, and it's based around reading a story. So you're guided through the story by the charming Ollie Richards. After you listen to and read the chapter multiple times, then there are videos explaining the vocabulary and the grammar that you've just been exposed to. Everything's broken down for you, and the idea is that you pick up Spanish naturally rather than having to memorize lists of vocabulary. I like the course and I recommend it. I did a review of it that you can check out. I'll link it down below if you want a bit more information. There is also the classic Pimsleur, and some people absolutely swear by it. I'm leaving it here because I know a lot of people love it. I haven't really used it that much. It's mostly in English first of all, but some people absolutely love it, so I'm just going to make you aware of it if you didn't know it was a thing before. It's basically a call and response type thing where the narrator says something in English and then someone says something in Spanish and you're asked to repeat it. It does try and encourage you to speak from day one. I don't recommend that, but it's your journey. You do what you want. The next one is Dreaming Spanish. If you're learning Spanish and you haven't yet heard of Dreaming Spanish, welcome to the cult. This is the main resource that I've used to get me to the point where I can start to understand native media. I've used a ton of other resources, as you will see in this video, but this is one of the biggest ones I've used. It's so good and there's so much to talk about that I've done another video of it, which you can find on this channel. Basically, the method works without you realizing it. And so far, I've got to the point where I haven't had to do any real studying to get where I am. Through watching the videos at the right level for you, of course, you acquire new words in context. If you subscribe to the premium stuff on the website, you get access to a load more videos, as well as the podcast feed, which is just the audio for those videos. I would often just put a video on in my pocket and listen to that as I walk the dog. If you're more of a beginner though, you do need to watch it, as the visual clues are going to help you get meaning for the stuff that you don't understand. And it is such good value, in my opinion. It is a must for anyone learning Spanish. So at some point you want to talk to another human and you won't yet be fluent in Spanish. So I prefer Crosstalk, which is a method in which you talk to someone in English and they talk back to you in your target language, in this case Spanish. It sounds weird, but it means you build up your understanding of people talking to you in Spanish without you having to worry about your mistakes if you're trying to speak, for example, because you're just speaking in English. There is a lot less stress and it makes the whole process much more enjoyable. Honestly, trust me on this one, I really recommend everybody tries it. It was a complete game changer for me. It's another one I've done a video about, so I'll link that down below as well. To get talking to people, I just use italki because I'm paying a tutor for their time, and therefore I feel like I can ask for particular things that make it suit my schedule. It does cost more money, of course, using italki and a language tutor. And there are other places online where you can do an exchange instead, which will save you some money. So HelloTalk is a good example of this, and it's completely free if you find someone to do a language exchange with. If you do try using an italki tutor, personally I'd say just drop them a message first of all, because some people can be a little bit reluctant to use it if it's something that they're not used to. But once you try it, you wish you found it sooner. So, what else? First of all, I'll say exposure to the language at your level is the biggest thing you need to do in order to acquire the language. So I don't like listening to the stuff that is too hard for me because I can't pick up the words because of the context. and I'm not a young whippersnapper anymore, so I don't have time to sit around listening to stuff that I mostly don't understand. So I found a huge benefit in finding stuff where you can pick up the language naturally without being lost and having to look up the words. And that brings me on to podcasts. There are so many great podcasts for Spanish learners. It makes getting input in Spanish so easy. Once you can get a lot of listening input about your level or just above, you're going to notice a huge jump in your comprehension abilities. The level you're at will vary, of course, so try a few of these to just work out which level you're at. So the first is actually 3 podcasts, all by the very charming Thessal, who you can find under the name of Spanish Language Coach online. And there are podcasts depending on your level. So the first one is Spanish for False Beginners, then the Intermediate Spanish podcast, and imaginatively, the Advanced Spanish podcast. What I love about these podcasts is he's just talking about an interesting topic in Spanish at your level. I listen to his podcast every day at the minute and it's fantastic. There are transcripts as well of the podcast on his website, and he's also got a Spanish grammar course you can purchase if that's your jam. And the next recommendation will surprise you, Duolingo. No one recommends Duolingo, well neither do I, but if you're a lower intermediate, their podcast is great, like really good. It does use English so you understand the context, which you don't want as much as you get more advanced, you just want to be listen to actual Spanish, but the quality of the stories, and there was one series that had this whole thing about an Argentinian bank heist in which they got the literal bank robbers who had been to prison for this bank heist to tell the story about how they nearly got away with it. It was honestly insane. It was so interesting that it's just objectively good podcast. I haven't listened to it for a while now, but I really loved putting it on during my commute once I got out of the beginner phase. And whilst we're talking about podcasts, make sure you get yourself some decent headphones that you know you're going to use. I did a whole video on this, but basically you want to make it as easy as possible to get input at any time of day. So having comfortable headphones that you can have to hand at all times will make a surprising difference. I can't emphasize the benefits of large amounts of daily listening enough. So that this video doesn't end up horrendously long, I'm going to skim through a handful of other podcasts that I've been using, and once you get to a lower intermediate level, you then unlock this whole mountain of content. There's so much stuff out there for you to use by that stage. So first of all, Handy Spanish. This is a cracking podcast that not only talks about learning Spanish, of course, but also has interesting stuff on Spanish culture and customs and Spanish phrases that get you used to the culture of Spain. Now, I'm starting to mainly focus on listening to the Spanish from Spain, but that's relatively recent to me. Before, I was listening to No Hay Tos, which is a podcast from 2 Mexicans where they not only talk about Spanish and Mexican phrases, but also they just kind of chat about life. So sometimes it really does feel like you're listening to 2 friends have a chat where you're invited, and I really, really like it. For a mix of Spanish from Spain as well as some other dialects, I also use Conversations in Spanish and Other Languages, which is conversations from different Spanish speakers, and there is a variety of accents, which is kind of good to get you used to those. This is really great podcast, although they are in a variety of accents and it can sometimes take you a minute or 2 to kind of get your ear in, so to speak, but it does get you used to listening to different types of Spanish and understanding them a bit better. But wait, there's more, that's right. Once you listen to a lot of stuff and potentially watch a ton of stuff too, it's time to hit the books, which is when it comes to low-graded readers. Now, they are not all created equal. If you're not sure where to start, then this is the one. 101 Conversations in Simple Spanish by Ollie Richards. It's the first of the books to follow on from the Spanish Uncovered course, but you don't have to have done that course in order to be able to follow the book. It's just got some characters that are similar. When I bought it, I expected it to be 101 separate conversations, which would basically just get me used to Spanish vocabulary and grammar, and it isn't that at all. It's about a crime that happens in Spain, and the characters have to solve the mystery. So if you're looking for your first graded reader or your first book in Spanish, then this is it, I think. Written as a script rather than sort of a novel, which means you can just focus on following the story rather than getting bogged down on all the descriptions of things. There's also an intermediate 101 Conversations, which is also good. What I would say though is that they're standalone stories, so although they've got some of the same characters, you don't have to have read any of the other books in order to pick them up. Now, some Spanish graded readers are a little bit generic and are stories that just happen to have been translated into Spanish. So I'd recommend any of the books by Juan Fernandez. He's also on Spanish, of course, as Español con Juan. So I would recommend his books as there is a bit more of a feel to them, that they are simply designed to be in Spanish. There are a few more Spanish idioms and colloquialisms which are quite fun. They're written for learners by a Spanish chap and include references to Spanish culture, which I find to be a bonus. I've also read a load of Ollie Richards' other books, and I think I probably enjoyed the World War II book the most of them so far. I think it was the first one that I read that wasn't a story, so I was just pleasantly surprised that I could read stuff that I might have otherwise read in English anyway. So if World War II doesn't do it for you, he's got books on loads of other stuff as well. If you are at a higher level and you want to try a book for native speakers that is non-fiction, I listened to the audiobook for Atomic Habits, and I've got to say I was surprised how much I understood. Like, it was mostly fine. I have listened to it in English and I've read it in English as well, so I did have context for a lot of stuff. But if you're looking for something for native speakers but you're not quite ready for novels, then maybe try Atomic Habits or that kind of self-help type stuff where the language is going to be fairly simple. I'm also halfway through the comic for Dune, which is at the bottom of this pile here that I don't want to knock over, so I'm just going to leave that where it is. But because it's a graphic novel, it has got the visuals that help you to understand the story as well without having to look up words quite so much. Whilst we're talking about reading stuff, and as all the cool kids are trying it these days, there's now the infamous ChatGPT. So before the machines come take over the world and we have to send one back in time to save Sarah Connor, ChatGPT is the very fashionable AI which can create a story for you to read on a specific topic that you are interested in. You do have to be specific with the direction you give the bot though, otherwise it won't be at your level. So essentially, you could ask it to write a summary of your favourite film at a B1 level of Spanish, and voila, you have a short bit reading that should be hopefully comprehensible to you if you've given it the right instruction. That will be more interesting than reading about Spanish grammar. I've got another video coming up about this in the future, so subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on that one. So this next one's quite interesting, and who knew the internet was so clever? Whilst I've been in the midst of learning Spanish, I haven't read really any interesting things in English because it felt like it would take time away from my Spanish. And then I did a little experiment. I went on Stephen Krashen's website and I saved a copy of his book, which he lets you do for free, by the way, and I dropped it into Google Translate and bam, compelling input on a subject I'm interested in, which was quite fun. So find something in English, drop it in there and see what comes out. Obviously, be mindful if the English used is very articulate, then when you put it into the translator and the Spanish comes out the other end, that will also require you to have quite a high vocabulary. And so for reading, of course, there is Link, L-I-N-G-Q. I don't use it much at the moment, but I know, again, loads of people swear by it. You can import subtitles from Netflix and YouTube and just read the subtitles to improve your comprehension. Language Reactor is a thing, and you can use it to read the subtitles on YouTube and Netflix videos. You can skip between the subtitles as well to sort of read the video as you listen to the audio. I mostly just read the text if I use it, but you do you. There are some YouTube channels that are mostly voiceover, and I found it good for that sort of thing. Though annoyingly, for auto-generated YouTube subtitles, there's no punctuation, but you do kind of get used to it, so it's not so bad after a period of time. As your comprehension starts to improve, I would recommend listening to the radio, but only when you start to understand it. And I made this mistake early on in trying to listen to the radio and not really getting anything from it, because at that point for me, it was mostly just noise. So you do have to improve your listening comprehension first of all. So I would recommend probably sticking to some podcast design for learners until you're ready. Once you do though, I use an app called Simple Radio where you can listen to a ton of stations from all over the world. I usually put on Cadena Ser, which is Cadena and then SER. Which is mostly just speaking rather than songs. This is live radio, of course, so I don't have to select new podcasts or listen to the same stuff. I literally just press play and I can have it in the background all day if I wanted to. I do think there is something nice about it being live too. It makes the language sort of come to life rather than listening to recordings from the past. I know that sounds a bit weird, but that's just kind of how it feels to me, that the language is alive and people are talking it together. Speaking of the radio, there is also an app called Evox, which you can use to search for radio stations or podcasts. I use it to be a nerd and listen to a podcast called La Voz de Oros, but non-nerd stuff is available on there as well. So far, I've prioritized input over literally everything, and it's got me to the point I can understand a huge amount of stuff. But because I plan on starting to speak soon, it's now that I think it might be worth having a look at grammar, not least because I know you guys are going to be watching me when I do start doing that as well. So I might dust off my copy of Madrigal's Magic Key to Spanish and have a bit of a flick through, basically, maybe even some online guides. My thought being it might help me monitor my production of the language. Different people have different thoughts on this. I don't know what mine is yet. Though I do know some people swear by Madrigal's Magic Key, so and they actually use it to start learning Spanish through it. Like if you just check out some of the reviews on Amazon. To date, I've mostly used it as a prop in a video and to look pretty in my bookshelf, but I might have a flick through soon. And whilst we're talking about grammar, my first Spanish teacher would always refer to reverso conjugator, which I'll link it below. Basically, if you want to know how to conjugate something, this is the one. I don't really enjoy reading about grammar, and so I haven't really used this at all, but I know some people love that stuff, so if that's you, then check it out. My experience was, with my first teacher, that he would try and teach me grammar and correct my mistakes, and not only did it make the lesson a lot less fun, I also didn't understand the grammar because I don't know Spanish. My thought is that if you acquire the language first, then when you do look up any grammar explanations, it will make more sense, I think. Now, you will notice I haven't mentioned flashcards at all, and that's because I don't like them. They do work, I just don't enjoy them. And this isn't me throwing shade on flashcards. They can give your vocabulary a real boost. Reading is just spaced repetition of sorts, and I feel like I get a more implicit sense of the language through reading rather than consciously trying to pick up translations of words. I kind of feel like flashcards aren't as necessary for Spanish as well because there are so many great resources using comprehensible input. But if you want to try flashcards, then I would go with the OG Anki, A-N-K-I, and you can download it from ankiweb.net. On your iPhone, I think you still have to pay for it, but it's free on other devices. It's what I use to learn Chinese characters, and it works. Personally, I prefer to create my own cards, as the process of creating the cards sort of makes a memory that the reviews reinforce, rather than learning it for the first time, you do a review, and then forgetting it seconds later. If you do go with flashcards, I'd say you only have to have like 5 to 10 new words a day, otherwise quite quickly it feels overwhelming as the daily reviews rack up. It should be that flashcards are there to support your Spanish rather than feeling like it's the sole thing you need to be doing every day. The biggest thing I've got through my current approach is that I'm picked up a sort of natural understanding of Spanish, and I'm now using native content to continue the journey. So Netflix is full of awesome stuff. It's a cliche, but I'm working my way through La Casa de Papel, which is honestly incredible. I did a video a while back about my favorite YouTube channels, and I still watch Luisito Comunica, which if you haven't watched Luisito Comunica, he is so good, he's so amazing, and actually the level of Spanish isn't that difficult in it. If you're still a bit lower, then wait till you can get to that stage, but if you're an intermediate, watch his stuff. It is compelling and it's just great. Current channels that I'm watching, Clavero. He is a cool guy living in LA. I'm not a cool guy living in LA, but I can dream. He does videos that are sort of vlogs and sometimes like mini documentary type things, but he's very cool. Yep is Clavero's mate, and he does videos traveling the world as well as sort of vlogs and other stuff. I enjoy it as much for the cinematography as well as the Spanish. I'm also watching, strangely, Ter. Now, Ter does some, excuse my French, some random ass videos. They're often about like architecture or something like that, and I don't actually know how to explain her videos, but I find them entertaining enough. You do need to have pretty good comprehension, so I'd say it's kind of for like higher intermediates. My comprehension isn't 100% yet, but I still get enough from it to be like a productive use of my time. And here, ladies and gentlemen, is a little trick I will teach you hidden in the depths of this video. If you're watching some native content on YouTube, but you don't quite understand it because the speaker's talking too fast, you might be tempted to change the tempo of the video to slow it down. The issue is it suggests 0.75, which is like too slow, and it makes everyone sound weird and unnatural. Now, this trick only seems to work on a computer rather than on a phone. Click on the cog, then custom, and then drag it down to maybe 0.85. It will still sound natural, and if you have high enough vocabulary, this is a great way to get more out of native content that is generally spoken sometimes a little bit too fast, and then the more you get used to it and you can rack up your hours, you then can increase the speed that you watch it so it's back to normal speed. Share any more resources you think I've missed down below. Subscribe if you want to watch me speaking Spanish at some point, because I'm going to do it at some point in the future. And in the meantime, check out this playlist here. Thanks for watching, enjoy the journey, and good luck.